There's a little bit of a backup at the bar, but I think I'm going to go ahead and start my introduction. I see that our speaker is here, so all is secure. I'm so pleased that Michael Glancy is here with us tonight. The museum has a great collection of his work spanning many years of his career, thanks to Ben and Natalie Heineman and to Dan Greenberg and Susan Steinhauser. And you can see two of his objects in the Contemporary Gallery next time you go upstairs. About Michael's work, Howard Fox, the former curator of contemporary art at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, wrote, "Michael Glancy's art is centered in scientific and philosophical concepts, as evinced by references in the titles of his works to biology, molecular physics, astronomical bodies, relativity, mathematics, and infinitude. The works themselves incorporate blown and plate glass, copper, bronze, silver, and gold, and on occasion stone. He fuses glass and metal in a process known as electroforming, in which a high-voltage charge is passed through the materials. This strongly transformative process, together with his scientific interests, seems to position his creations within the practice of alchemy, at the intersection of physics and metaphysics, as much as in the domain of art," end quote. For me, Michael's work celebrates the complexity and mystery of nature. His pieces begin as cell-like patterns and arcane notations jotted down on paper. The objects slowly acquire form and texture, shaped and revealed by cutting, sandblasting, and electroforming. His pieces evolve from each other, and they are essentially organic. Even though the work is abstract, nature is always present. In a 2005 article by Maura Flannery titled "Goethe and the Molecular Aesthetic," I found an interesting idea that to me explained much about Michael's practice. Flannery, who is interested in the relationships between art and science, wrote of the famous German author, quote, "I came to the study of Goethe through an interest in the aesthetics of biology. What makes biology beautiful? I became convinced that scientific judgment involves aesthetic judgment. Exploration of this theme led me in a number of directions, including to the work of the chemist-philosopher Michael Polanyi, who explores the idea of tacit knowledge, knowledge that cannot be put into words, intuitive knowledge that comes with doing, with being immersed in an activity," end quote. Or, as Michael himself says, "The fun part for me is the meticulous work. With a pair of visors that cuts my reality, really tunnels my reality down into a different plane, I can get into a micro area. By occupying my hands, it frees my mind." Michael was born in Detroit, and he received his BFA from the University of Denver in 1973. He earned a second BFA at RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design, and he went on to pursue his master's there, which was granted in 1980. Since then, he has worked on and off at RISD as adjunct faculty in the Department of Metals, and of course, he has built a very successful independent studio practice. In 2001, Michael was honored with Urban Glass's Outstanding Achievement in Glass Award. He has also received grants from the Massachusetts Council on the Arts, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the International Center for Contemporary Art in Bordeaux, France. His work is in the permanent collections of museums worldwide. A short selection of these includes, of course, Corning, but also the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Carnegie Museum, the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, Toledo Museum of Art, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, the Art Gallery of Western Australia in Perth, the Musée des Arts Décoratifs and the Fonds National d'Art Contemporain in Paris, and the Hokkaido Museum of Modern Art in Japan. Finally, before I invite Michael to the lectern, I wanted to tell you that we have copies of his beautiful new book, Infinite Obsessions, available for purchase in the Glass Market. The photographs in the book are amazing, and it is a gorgeous publication. Michael is willing to sign some copies after the lecture. I think we're having a signing, so please take advantage of his being here. I wrote one of the essays in the book, and it just happens to be one of my favorite pieces of writing, and I'm not just saying that. So perhaps that will also help you to decide, to convince you that now is the time to buy this special publication. And now that the commerce portion of my introduction is over, I give you Michael Glancy.
Thank you, Tina. That didn't even sound like me. But I do remember some of those moments. It's really it's mostly a privilege to be invited to the Corning Glass Museum, but in spite of the fact that I'm a very nervous speaker, it's really a pleasure to be here as well. And as you'll see with my slide presentations, I've been here before and am looking forward to coming back. So I have lots of interests and only a few true passions. And one of those passions is glass blowing. And this is a slide that was taken at Corning in 1974. And I'm not even sure whether this model still exists. I did spend some time looking for it, but it's a wooden carved model of a glass shop. There were actually two of them outside the Steuben viewing area. I came to glass working the hard way. I was an economics major at my college, and for therapy I would take art classes. And I was studying business and economics because I thought that's what my dad would want me to be doing. And I did go to preparatory school, but it really didn't seem to prepare me for the real world. But it did give me a really good education, and a solid one at that, and for that I was very appreciative. But so we started, I met the first female graduate of Alfred University, and her husband and myself, we made a collaboration. I had a van and $100, and we built a glassblowing facility and started teaching classes to pay for the fuel at the Denver Free University. They also offered classes in macrame and others that I don't remember. But the facility was actually in a wooden structure with people living above it. We had no permissions from the city of Colorado. And when my mom came down to visit, and I wanted to take her in and show her what my new passion, we walked in, and there was somebody from the city who had cut the gas line and put a condemned sign on the, and I was dating a girl who was a secretarial assistant to a local state senator, Robin. She became my wife quite a few years later, but we were able to negotiate with the city, and they gave us permission to build this facility that you see. And it was still in a wooden building with people living above it, and it really probably should not have been there. But having survived that experience and graduating from the University of Denver, I knew enough to be interested to continue my education. And so I visited Marvin Lepofsky on the West Coast because I had this closet notion of Haight-Ashbury, and you notice my hair had grown a little long, and I was very attracted to San Francisco. But then I had a chance to meet Dale Chihuly at the School for American Indians in Santa Fe, and he came with two graduate students and had requested a space with a 1-inch gas line and some refractory bricks. They brought with them a burner, a Giberson burner, and a crown. And on the first day, they actually constructed a glass facility. On the second day, they charged it with glass and melted the glass. The third day, they demonstrated it, and then they left a fully functioning glass facility for the school. And that was enough for me to know that the Rhode Island School of Design was the school I would wished to be in. And so in 1974, we moved from Colorado to Providence, Rhode Island, and it is one of the best moves I ever made. But really, what attracted me is the same thing that probably has attracted all of you. It's smoke and fire, and the depth of that romantic vision. The RG squared piece that you see on the right was made in 1978 and is really the first object that I feel was had real potential and motivated my career. The early 70s, and Dale's method of teaching was really to demonstrate, and he would push us to go to the library, to go to galleries, to learn as much as you possibly could learn, or at least to just go, maybe. And my voice irritated him a little bit, I think, and there was really nothing I could do about that, but he's learned to enjoy it now. He knows me from a great distance, let's just say that. And so I did spend quite a bit of time in our library, and the School of Design has incredible libraries in Providence, Rhode Island. We also have Brown University, so they have scientific facilities, and I gained a real appreciation for libraries. This is a shot in 1974. Our library has moved at the School of Design, and it doesn't have the same sort of wood-paneled feel to it, but the rare books are there, and the students use it very, very much like your library here, which is possibly one of the greatest collections of knowledge in this subject anywhere in the world. While there, I was enamored with the work of Maurice Martineau, and of course decided that I should do a little hydrofluoric acid etching myself. Now, I dare say that today you couldn't even get anyone to sell you hydrofluoric acid. But, and as a student, I really didn't know much about it, but Dale said, call Corning. You're going to see this theme repeat itself constantly. Call Corning, and they can help you with their research and with their expertise. And I did just that, and their advice gave me enough confidence to be able to set up a ventilation system that was safe and that worked well, and I was able to do a series of experiments culminating in some very interesting projects. But ultimately, I was a little disappointed because it made me feel as though I was replicating, pieces that were made by somebody in 1934. I mean, I did get good results. 1976 was marked in Rhode Island by the arrival of the tall ships and for the 300th anniversary of the United States, and so I actually made this tall ship project. I can give you all sorts of stories about how one of the things I learned at Corning was that you put as much sulfuric acid in your hydrofluoric acid bath as you do hydrofluoric acid, and the reason is hydrofluoric acid, if you get it on you, you can't feel it. It goes and it attacks bone marrow. It goes into your body. It's very dangerous. And there are technical reasons to put hydrofluoric acid for the removal of bubbles and things like that. But one of the most practical reasons is if you get it on you, you'll know you have it on you and you can get it off. The idea, of course, is never to get it on you. But so I had remembered at the last moment, I had done all this stenciling for this is a full-size door I presented to you in a drawing, but it was a full-size 8-panel door. And it was all laid out with, I think, contact paper was my stenciling material. It was fairly primitive. But then I had it in the baths, and I went, oh no, I haven't added my sulfuric acid. And so I just poured it right on top. And what happens when you do that is you get a thermal reaction. It gets hot, like really hot. And all my stencils start floating up to the surface. And I tell you, there's nothing like failure to give you a real classy education. But so my wife and I were married. She came with me from Colorado. Her family lived on Cape Cod. We were married in Harwichport, Cape Cod in 1977, went on our honeymoon, and immediately went to Pilchuck. Doesn't everybody? At that time, population 49. Now, Pilchuck, this is a photograph of the lodge the year it was completed. And you can't see him, the photo's too small, but Tom Bosworth is the architect, and he's in the blue shirt on the railing, surveying his good works. But Pilchuck glass blowing is really, the Venetian style of glass blowing is to have a master, and he coordinates a team. And it's a very beautiful dance that you all have participated in enjoying and watching. And the choreography is brilliant. It's always a collaboration between the artist and highly skilled assistants. But it's also was the breeding ground for some very serious artists. And so I had the opportunity, I was thinner then, to work with Dante Marioni, who has quite a few pieces in our collection here. And the collaboration, the collaborative spirit was really founded in the American studio glass movement through places like Pilchuck and Penland and Haystack. And it was collaboration on many different levels. This is the annual Salmon Bake. I think Rich Royal is there. I see Benny Moore and John Reed. John Reed is the developer. Everybody eats together. They share their work. Every night is a presentation, slide presentation. And then the artists in residence will be making demonstrations in the faculty virtually around the clock. So it's one of the most intense learning experiences. And so I thought I'd show you some of my Polaroid SX70 album. They don't even make Polaroid anymore. And to show you kind of what it was like, or to try to show you a little bit of what it was like. The lodge was beautiful, the indigenous architecture. Jamie Carpenter was still trying to make objects back then. Tina, you'll be happy to see. On the lower left there is a Hank Adams piece. They were all pretty cool. I had discovered electroforming then, and I was manipulating the photographs in the same manner that Lucas Samaras was doing back then, and having fun doing it. And the checkerboard image is from the bathroom floor at the Biltmore where we were having a crit. I don't know why I took that picture, but I liked it. In 1975, Kate Elliott was helping Dale pioneer his thread drawing techniques. You have some of Dale's best cylinders in the museum collection. This one I thought was in the collection, but you can't really, I just remember it, and it looks like one of the pieces that you have. Kevin Gleason is a student, and I was an undergraduate, and had the real privilege of working with Dale and Jamie Carpenter during its real heyday. And you can see that it was rather remarkable. I show a picture of my mom, upper left, with my son Mike. He's a designer for Under Armour with his wife, who's also a designer. And she's pregnant with my first grandchild, who will be a girl, will be coming, a new girl, Glancy, will be coming in the fall. But I show Mom because she would knit. I think my experience motivated her, and so she would knit sweaters. And Eric Hopkins is there pouring glass. I'm probably running. I could tell stories. Boy, I could tell stories. But you'll have to ask me afterwards about, tell me that Eric Hopkins story, and I will. Newport was there. Dale is wearing one of my mom's sweaters and holding, he's agreeing that this piece has merit, unlike everything else you've done, so maybe you should stay. And so in 1977, like I said, we went to Pilchuck, my wife and I, as students. And at that time, there were no cabins, there were platform tents. It was so damp there, being north of Seattle, that in order to get into your sleeping bag, you had to lie on it for about 30 minutes and let your body heat sort of warm it so you could pry it open. But it was physically beautiful. And after 3 weeks, my wife and I were ready to go. And they came to me and asked me to be a teaching assistant, because that's how they find their people, from within the community. And I wanted to go home. But you can't say no. And I said, oh, no, I'm newly married and my wife will miss me. Oh no, she can stay and organize the library, which was a nascent project at the time. So we stayed for another semester, and the following year they asked me to teach. While in at Pilchuck, Bert Thiel and Ulrika Wallin from Sweden were faculty members. Jan-Erik Rietzman was the first European master to be brought to the United States to demonstrate glassblowing, before Lino, actually, in 1978. And so Ann Worf was there, Ann Wolf was there, and she said, Michael, you have to come to Sweden. We have a tradition of a heavy-walled vessel, and I need heavy, not the Venetian tradition of paper thin. I needed a massive walled vessel because I was going to be cutting into it with sandblasting. Sandblasting was something that in 1977 I studied with Dan Daly. I'd never seen a sandblaster before. I was working with the Marneau pieces, but they looked 230s. This sandblaster gave a really contemporary crisp edge, very tight, and I would take my work back and acid etch it to use my facility, but to give it that certain glow. Toots Zinski is on the left, another well-known artist, Dan Daly, and this is a critique there. The following year, I had a student, the man with the mustache. I think he was attracted to my Costa Rican teaching assistant. She was very attractive. And Thomas was in a different class. He claims he switched classes because he really wanted to learn what I had to teach. But as it turned out, Thomas was a designer from Baccarat who was responsible for over 60% of Baccarat's production. And so the funny thing about a Frenchman is if you befriend a Frenchman, they're your friend for life, I think. And so Thomas and I have been friends since that moment. And we share his mother's cottage in Normandy. This is my wife, Robin, and the family. there in Baccarat. He introduced me to Baccarat, and we made some prototypes, but they were, they were really overproduced, and I love the ashtray with the cracks. They weren't as enamored as I was, but to take that beautiful crystal and do that. But while I was in Paris that first year, I was locked into the Musée d'Arts Décoratifs room that had the Maurice Merneau collection. I had asked permission to draw it, and they said, "Oh, that gallery's closed." And I went, "Closed? I came from America to see this. Couldn't I please?" And I somehow talked my way into the gallery, and they locked me in. You can see the gates in the back there. A security guard would come every now and then. I put my camera on this really 17th century parquet. It's not a piano, but an instrument to take that picture. Probably shouldn't have done that, but it was really quite remarkable, and the food was really good. And I don't know why we liked it so much, but we did. And so with the reception of a grant, National Endowment grant, I took my kids there, and I bought them. I brought a copy of The Red Balloon, which is a video that shows some of Paris's most beautiful aspects, and the only English was balloon, balloon, or the only French was balloon, and asked them if they would like to go there and go to school there and for 6 months, and they said yes, and we were very lucky to have an incredible experience, which we've repeated as a family as often as we possibly can. While there, certain doors were open. I had the opportunity I was invited by the International Contemporary Art Center at Chateau Béchevel. They make a not too shabby wine, by the way. And for the next 3 years, they flew us there just to be inspired by the place and to present a concept to 4 different types of artists, sculptors, painters, new genre, computer, graphic arts people, video people, and one other that I'm missing. But I was in the sculpture. They would bring 2 artists together, and we had to compete. And I can remember at the dinner there, raising my hand and saying, "Oh, what a lovely place this is. It's such good hospitality. And the only problem is that you've put us together like gladiators, and we have to fight each other." And I can remember the director, and it was a collaboration with a Japanese company as well. And the director, they were kind of shocked, and the translator said, "We will address this later." And what I didn't realize was at the end of the meal, they were going to announce that they liked all of the artists so much that they were going to commission all of them. So I really stuck my foot in there. But the project that I decided to do was a completely new object that required the assistance of Ken Honeybell, the chairman of the Industrial Design Department at Rhode Island School of Design. And I was attempting to increase scale. At the same time as this commission at Chateau Béchevel, I had a commission for a lobby in New York that the Heller Gallery, who I was showing with at the time, said, "Oh, you shouldn't do that. You never get enough money, and artists always spend more money, and don't do it." And my wife said, "Oh, it'll be good for you." And so we designed this Helix cage system. It's kind of like a ship in a bottle, only the bottle's on the inside and the ship's on the outside. This one is being made. The object is inverted. I was experimenting with blown glass, Ben Moore's studio, Preston Singletary's in the background, Rich Royal, and another unidentified assistant were helping to make these large blown glass objects for me. And I was simultaneously working with Dan Clayman, casting, my first casting experience. This cast came out at around 240 pounds, making the Helix cage that I was developing slightly impractical. The blown glass object was about 45 pounds and worked much better. It was installed in a lobby in New York at 333 East 38th Street, still there. Golden nucleic fusion. I positioned it on a 2,200 pound piece of granite so that they couldn't get rid of it very easily. And the real trick was, there's a terrazzo base plate that sits on. The real trick was, how do you get the straps out from underneath this piece of stone and move it into the proper position with lead gaskets underneath it, because they're going to be cleaning the area around it. And that job was given to Sacco Basanti, the Marble King of Brooklyn, because he suggested dropping it on ice. And it worked like nobody's business. This is the building manager trying to be helpful. The problem was that it collapsed. The joints were, I used a lead-based solder because I was worried that if I brazed it, it would anneal the metal and it would collapse. And so the joint started to break, and very, very slowly, imperceptibly, the vessel was descending. And I just wished it would go back up. And it did. So it took another year to analyze the problem, which required filing each joint, and each joint was different, using a silver bearing solder and wrapping it in silver. I had wrapped the joint, just came back from Japan, and was meticulously wrapping these joints and having a heck of a good time with copper wire. The copper wire contaminated the weld, the solder joint, and led to the collapse of that. We resolved that by using silver wire and by seating each wire into an appropriate seat. This was my son who helped me deliver it. And at the same time, so 4 of these objects were made, 2 3 foot high and 2 6 feet high. This is the evolution of one other where it's being prepared for the carving. Ben Moore made this object. It's really quite large. I've always been blessed to have the assistance of the scientific community. Providence is big. Industry is costume jewelry. Therefore, electroplating, which is putting one metal, usually precious, over a base metal, was a big industry. Technic Incorporated is a world leader in this. They were right in Cranston, Rhode Island. And Eric was one of their main men, and he helped me a lot. This was the piece for the Chateau Bechevel, Arete, the Valley, the Virtue, had to do with their oblique, which is often the case with the French theme. Several other, Tevatron fusion. I had a show at the Fermi National Laboratory Accelerator outside of Chicago. That was something, I will tell you. I learned a lot from that. But mostly, I think I'm most proud of my relationship with Jan-Erik Rietzman, and which started in, I think, 1987, and has been going strong ever since that. I spoke with Jan Erik. He's going to be 70 this year, he says. And I spoke with Jan Erik just 3 days ago. And the village is Trancha, Sweden, just outside of Kosta, 10 kilometers from Bertil and Erika's Valin, their factory. My relationship with this village of 25 people, when I brought my wife and my 2 kids, I think there were 28, and we broke 30 people, and that was cause for a party. And I mean, this is ingrained in the traditions, the Scandinavian traditions are ingrained in what I do, and I'm really most proud of my association with Jan Erik, with his village, and with the Swedish glass tradition, which then massively improved not only is this an incredibly beautiful place to work, and it's not really working. My wife and my kids have been there, they know. And but the quality of the glass, the actual physical glass body quality, is so high that one of the major traditions of Scandinavian glass is they don't accept bubbles in the glass, and they'll actually go in and extract them. We don't do that in America. If we have a bubble, we call it character and tend to charge extra for it if we can. And so the Sasanian piece on the right is not from Sweden, but it looked good in the slide, so I showed it. But you can tell that there's a certain quality of the glass which is really superior. This is it's called painted radiation because there's a uranium glass veil on this, and it really shines. But the real main reasons I go is because Tuesdays is pub night. And in the glass shop, the entire village comes together. Well, not the entire village, but many of them, just to talk. And we get to go ice fishing. The physical terrain is magnificent. You can see that Jan Erik and I take this very seriously. The log is something that you should experience. They take a seasoned piece of wood out onto the ice, plop it down. Usually the assistant gets to do that. And with a chainsaw, they cut an X in it and down, a third of the way, and then pour kerosene in there and light it, and it's an oven, it's a stove. You can see the one forward has just been lit, and you can cook on it, and it burns for hours magnificently. And in lieu of catching any fish, you always bring some sausage with you as well. I live in Rehoboth, Massachusetts. It's the birthplace of public education in America, the town was founded in 1643. It's very, very old. My barn is old, not as old as 1643, but it's right up there. This is a picture of my house when the barn was up by the street, and they picked it up and moved it to the back. It was in need of some repair, and so in the early 80s, I turned it into a studio. And what I did that's different, perhaps, and worthy of mentioning is the fact that I have a great respect for anything older than I am. For instance, the first thing I did, the house is in the forest. First thing I did was buy a chainsaw. Now, I believe that you can go out, you can cut down any tree that's younger than you are. But if that tree is older than you are, you have no right to cut it. You actually have to protect it. And this building was over 100 years old, and so I didn't knock it down, but rather I strengthened it and fixed it and put new material on the inside and on the outside. So we sandwiched in this building the 100-year-old soul of this structure. And I think it's rewarded me with an incredible place to work. This was when it was new. This is how it looks now. And Tina, if you look real closely on the image on the left, you'll notice that there's a Lee Montague right here, and there's another Lee Montague. I wanted to have an image of Lee Montague, who's a sculptress, really powerful, in my book, and she doesn't let anyone reproduce her work at all. So I put it on my wall. And I'm very fortunate to have some really incredible assistants. Miles Baer on the left is a musician. He's in his 17th year working with me. And on the right is Adrienne Evans, who's done a workshop in the studio here. She's a master mold maker, wax person, and casting. And there's a very important link in my studio of a object from Pompeii that I believe is a perfect object. So I called my presentation today almost perfect, because I've studied this piece, and I first encountered this object in the Glass of the Caesars show at the Corning Glass Museum. I believe it was 1987, and was so enamored that, to me, this is an ideal piece. And so engraving has become, it's engraved with what I refer to as a Pompeii pattern, which comes off of that. In this case, Miles is engraving a different pattern, but using the same traditional tools. German tools, they go back hundreds of years, thousands of years. This was the plate before it was polished, where you can see the network of hammered tool marks, which we strive very hard to maintain. And I thought we could take a closer look. And if we take a closer look at some of the pieces, you may find, images that look like rivers, possibly the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in the cradle of civilization, in where we refer to as Iraq. Or you could find Sasanian. Bill is wearing a tie that Paul Hollister gave him. And Paul Hollister's a critic from New York who looked at me and he goes, "Michael, do you know Sasanian glass?" And I went, "No." And he got so excited to share Sasanian. This is one of Corning's masterworks right here. And my modest take on that, if you're contemplating my work, you might, and you're flying over, say, Kenya, you might see flamingos. And this might have something to do with that blistered paint you saw on the window walking to work one day. Infinite obsessions. I mean, I admit I have a problem, but I'm dealing with it. Adrienne's skills are in latex mold making, working with wax, and then the new traditional casting, foundry castings, which can be done in you can, once the model is made, the wax can then be cast in bronze, it can be cast in stainless steel, it can be cast in chocolate, soap, virtually anything, and it's the same methods. She's working in a different world. This is underneath one of my objects. But with this, and really my fascination with the foundry tradition really is very personal, and it allows me to learn something new, totally new. And that's a rare gift. But in order for me to introduce this to my fans and my galleries, I've, put glass on metal base plates. I've put metal pieces on glass base plates. And then in one gigantic leap of faith, I made a mirror polished stainless steel object and placed it on a mirror polished stainless steel base plate. And I just thought it was terrific. Regrettably, my dealer didn't agree with me. But I show you a new slide. This is one of the newest pieces, and I give you a tiny little hint. But I'll go back. The jazz piece was molded. Before it was carved, it was molded. After it was engraved, and so we had a mold that produced a wax that made the stainless steel liquid jazz piece on the right. Now, Adrian is manipulating that object, and we're putting it on the inside of the object. It is now the bubble, the negative space, and the glass is wrapping on the outside. And this is really very exciting new potential. This piece is in New York, but I think it was accomplished. I don't think it was in the last show that when the book was published. If it was the last piece. I think it came into the gallery after the show. And here you can see her working on the jazz object, but this is the inner core for the casting. The casting, you'll have to ask the casting class for a demo, because it's a complicated process that has been facilitated it's very technical. Adrian is a fellow faculty member at the School of Design, and we basically are learning and refining these techniques as we make them. But the results are terrific. And so when Barry was in the studio looking at this, I told him, I said, I don't know why I need to do this so badly. He looked at me and he goes, it's the bubbles. And it is the bubbles, because it's another level of control. You not only get to control the color of the glass and the purity of the glass, but you get to control the density of the bubbles. The bubbles can be pinpoint bubbles. And then when I carve through and it pops a bubble, this puts a pattern that is then translated into the metal. I love my work. It's a real problem. But so you can see the Pompeii cut from that Pompeii object most clearly in the base plate and on a larger scale on the mirror polished stainless and some other favorites. Max Black perspective. I hide little tidbits in the title, and the tidbits reward people's further investigation. I suggest you Google Max Black. Now, many people think it's because the piece is black, and it's like maximum black, like max headroom. It's not. Well, it could be, but there might be something else. Fluid dynamic, this is the same object with the base plate reversed. And so I call one side day and the other side night. That's kind of an honor, that's that's for my mom too, because she would change the house every year. In the wintertime, things would be out, and when spring came, she would put slip covers over the couches, take things out, open drawers, put things in, take the carpets, roll them up, put grass carpets in, and I went, yeah, I like that. Let's give them 2 for the price of 1. I've been collaborating with a collector on the West Coast who had the last bit of this beautiful blue glass that was produced in a factory in Brazil in the late 50s to the middle 60s. Took 12 years to negotiate with him to get the last pieces of this glass. And so this is what it took for me to get the rest of it, which is enough for me. And so I developed a very different object with the help of he does really exotic, he has glass machinery that will cut and polish edges. Another exciting change has been, I've been casting sterling silver medallions that I put into the glass base plates, and they were so cool. I said, I have to make a cowboy belt. And the cowboy belt is serious, and I'm sorry I didn't wear it tonight, but it's so heavy it pulls my pants down. But cowboys love that, you know. Also, I've had a chance, we're now teaching, as we must, we're now teaching CNC, computer numeric code, and 3D techniques at the Rhode Island School of Design, because, you know, our students can be hired for this and get a job. And so in order to gain some sort of skill, I thought that, I don't teach it, but I thought that I should work with it as well. And so on the left you see the original wax that was used to cast the bronze object, and a rapid prototype core from a 3-dimensional program that was then used to machine a solid stainless steel core, which you'll see on the piece on the right, and different iterations of this. I've just made these 2 pieces. I am working on putting a stainless steel core into a cast glass object. It's difficult and very slow. I don't make many pieces per year. And this is how the stainless object is presented. And you remember seeing I mentioned that Adrian works in the underworld. That's below the base plate. And the feet are quite tall. And so it's displayed. You want to look at it. But, you know, if you really want to look, you got to get down and see underneath it, too. And the feet are positioned to encourage that experience. So I am contemplating scale, but, you know, really, I'm almost there, and my true passion is for exhibitions. This is one of my first exhibitions in Western Maryland University in a really cool building. I had over 100 pieces. They weren't all carved in electroform, but the beginnings of my exhibition career are there. I've worked for over a decade with a gallery in Basel, Switzerland, where even the wild boar are happy. I've been teaching at the Rhode Island School of Design since 1981, and so for over 10 years I've been honing my teaching skills, and it's an incredible environment that Dale Chihuly brought me there. This is the opening of a new building where it was inaugurated by a Chihuly show, and they called it the Chihuly years, but the fact is it was kind of sons and daughters of Dale Chihuly, because everybody he worked with is really close. My dealer's Barry Friedman, married to Patricia Pastor in his gallery in Chelsea in New York. The book project, the show opened May 5th in 2011. My first show in New York was in 1980, and my last show was in 2011. And, you know, if my dad were alive today, he'd be amazed, because it's not economics, really. And so I'm still kind of a closet hippie. This is my anti-war statement. It's called Pax Mad. Pax, of course, the Latin word for peace. Mad for mutually assured destruction. And these are all little bombs going off. Down below there are explosions, and the little people are dying. And Barry didn't like hearing that either, but he loved the peace. A couple of pictures of the installation of Infinite Obsessions, a favorite, Tempest, and to relax and to, when things get too much, I race my little beetle cat, 12 and a half feet by 6 feet. These boats were made in Fall River, Massachusetts in the early 20s by a man named Beetle. They're not named after the cute little critter. His name was Beetle. The boats are such a beautiful design, gaffed rigged. It's like a large model that you can actually sit in and play with. And, you know, on behalf of my wife Robin, not bad. On behalf of my wife Robin, my son Mike is a designer at Under Armour with his wife Liz, also designer at Under Armour, and my son Rob. Rob runs he's the business manager for a well-known camp on Cape Cod, and I have a beautiful family, and you know, they have to put up with me because being an artist might seem pretty glamorous, but there are rough spots, and these guys put up with me. So on behalf of all of them, I thank you for inviting me and having me. Yeah.
Not almost perfect, it was perfect.
It was almost perfect, but
We have time to take a few questions.
I know that there are students of the studio school, and you know, Amy and Bill have done a remarkable job. This is internationally, this is a serious place. Now, I do have another presentation that the students will be interested in seeing. I don't think it's the how do I do it, you know, step-by-step kind of method that I know that they will enjoy, and that this will be available, but I don't think you need to see it unless you wanted to. There's like 30 slides, but
I don't think we have time.
no, and yeah.
Thank you, though.
And this is enough. But
that's
there
nice.
is, so for you, I think it'll be, somehow it'll be posted online, these images, or at least you can go to the library and look at them, and there aren't any real notes on it.
Well, speaking of the library, Michael gave us a very beautiful addition to our library of his book Infinite Obsessions with a special glass plate on it. So thank you very much, Michael. That's very special for you.
Oh, no, thank you. That was okay.
Well, if you do have questions, please feel free to ask Michael for a few minutes after the lecture, but I will let you go for those who need to go. Thank you very much, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you.